take your questions. I'm Ernie Manouse.
And I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman. We'll also dive into the top stories of the day, including a proposal to allow smaller homes on smaller lots in Texas cities to help tame the state's high home prices and rents.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. We'll also discuss a bill that passed in the Texas Senate that aims to move the state to permanent daylight savings time year-round.
And as Ernie, Frank, and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, your questions, and concerns. Give us a call or shoot us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
All that and more right here on Hello Houston after the news from NPR and News 88.7.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Trump administration is attempting to cut off about $100 million worth of remaining federal contracts with Harvard University, according to a senior administration official. It's the latest salvo in the administration's dispute with the Ivy League school, the oldest higher education institution in this country. NPR's Morning Edition spoke with Harvard University President Alan Garber about the legal battle against the administration's executive actions and funding cuts.
Why cut off research funding? Sure, it hurts Harvard, but it hurts the country. Because after all, the research funding is not a gift. The research funding is given to universities and other research institutions to carry out work that the federal government designates as high priority work. It is work that they want done.
Separately, NPR and 3 Colorado public radio stations filed suit this morning in federal court against the Trump White House over the president's executive order purportedly barring the use of congressionally appropriated funds for NPR and PBS. Federal health officials say the COVID vaccines are no longer being recommended for healthy pregnant women or children. Here's NPR's Rob Stein.
The Department of Health and Human Services posted a video on X announcing the decision to remove healthy pregnant people and children from the list of those who should get routine vaccination against COVID. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was flanked by National Institutes of Health Director Jay Bhattacharya and Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Martin McCary in announcing the decision.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule.
The decision was made without the usual input from independent advisors. Rob Stein, NPR News.
In England, local authorities say 4 people remain hospitalized after a minivan plowed into crowds of soccer fans who are celebrating Liverpool's Premier League championship. A man's been arrested, but NPR's Fatima Al-Kassab reports the incident's not being treated as an act of terrorism.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the whole country stands with the city of Liverpool after a car rammed into crowds at Liverpool Football Club's victory parade.
Well, scenes of joy turned to utter horror and devastation, and my thoughts and the thoughts of the whole country are with all of those that are affected.
More than 24 people were injured, including several children. The Prime Minister said he is being kept updated with the police investigation. Police are questioning a 53-year-old white British man who is believed to be the driver of the car. Fatima Al-Kassab, NPR News, London.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. There are currently about 55,000 CenterPoint customers without electricity in the Houston area as a result of the early morning storms that swept across the region. That's down from 87,000 outages a few hours ago. There's been some damage reported north of the Houston metro area as a result of the weather. A tree went through a house in Conroe, and firefighters responded to an attic fire at a home in the Woodlands that they believe was caused by a lightning strike. Texas has already seen temperatures hitting over 100 degrees this summer, and medical experts are now warning about the dangers of extreme heat for pregnancies. Texas Public Radio's David Martin Davies reports.
Pregnant women and their fetuses are particularly vulnerable to extreme heat, even in the early stages of pregnancy. According to Dr. Lindsay Darrow, professor of epidemiology in the School of Public Health at the University of Nevada, Reno.
Exposure to extreme heat can lead to adverse pregnancy outcomes. So things like preterm birth, stillbirth.
Darrow said the longer the exposure to extreme heat, the more likely a pregnancy will be impacted, and high humidity is also a factor.
But we do absolutely know that humidity affects how hot a person feels and a person's ability to cool off.
Darrow said because of climate change and heat waves becoming more common, more research is needed, but it's clear that extreme heat is becoming a bigger public health issue. I'm David Martin Davies in San Antonio.
Recent arrests made by ICE at immigration courts are making some people concerned about appearing. Immigration attorney Charles Foster told Hello Houston if the government keeps deporting people, it'll cause problems for a lot of businesses.
Mass deportation, if it could be executed, would destroy the U.S. economy. It would be almost impossible to imagine how those jobs could be filled.
Foster also mentioned that details on how a person will get funding as a result of self-deportation are not clear. It's 77 degrees, partly sunny, with a chance of thunderstorms. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for individuals in a variety of career fields who want to help build a culture of inclusiveness. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello, Houston.
They're back.
It's great.
The gruesome twosome is back in the studio.
It's great
Celeste,
to be back.
Frank, thank you. You guys were gone.
Yeah.
It seemed like forever.
Yeah, but it was only two. But I do want to send out a special thanks to Doug Miller, who sat in and filled in. It took a Doug Miller, a seasoned pro, to fill in for the two of you. They wouldn't let me just.
But only one. It only took one to fill in
one.
for two.
We've got a ton on today's show, and we're going to jump right into it, and then we'll find out all about you guys in a little bit. I do want to say, coming up, we're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. You've heard so much about it. What is really in it? Most of us are getting our information from silos about where we stand politically, but what is the truth behind the bill? What does it say? What is it cutting? What is it adding? We're going to dig into all that. We want your questions and comments on it. 713-440-8870. That's coming up later in the show. But we're going to jump right in, as I mentioned, because in-house right now, we have Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo is with us today, taking your calls and questions, exploring the headlines, the news, what's going on. 713-440-8870, or you can email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Judge, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Judge Hidalgo, you released a statement earlier this morning about the storms that moved through Harris County. And from what I understand, there's still about 56,000 people and homes without power. Can you give us an update about that?
Yes, so we were on the phone with our Office of Emergency Management this morning, alongside, of course, Jeff Lindner, meteorologist, and a representative from Centerpoint. And they were explaining they're working around the clock. They've brought additional crews, Centerpoint has, to restore power to those clients that are without power, those customers. What he explained is each individual meter could be a meter for an entire facility, right? Doesn't mean it's just a home. And so they, as always, they prioritize hospitals, et cetera, but there's no reports of anything major. So, if there's a really problematic downed line that really affects a lot of different units, then it'll take a little bit longer. But the sense was this will be fine by the end of today.
It's so hard to prepare, isn't it? I mean, what do you do to get ready for something like that? And I'll tell you, looking at models, it looks like Wednesday afternoon, another round of this is on the way.
Yes, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I will say Jeff Linder was explaining to us that because of a drop in humidity right now, and you understand this better than I do, that it's not going to be as bad. It's going to kind of calm down for a bit, and whatever's coming on Wednesday is not going to be as widespread. Does that mean we will not have outages? No. And so to answer your question, what do you do to prepare? It's hurricane season either way. We live in Houston, Harris County. We all know what we've been through. And so, what I've finally done is just have at home, have your kit ready for a power outage, for having to be at home for a few days. Just have that year round.
No,
And just jump in on the tag on that. Online, you guys have all the information, what you should have in your kit. Where do people go?
It's readyharris.org.
Okay. Thank you, Celeste.
Are you concerned at all the fact that we're really not in the peak season yet? And yes, we can be prepared, but as Houstonians and people that live in the area, I mean, this was pretty mild, and it seems like to have that amount of, power outages already. What are y'all doing besides, having a kit? Are y'all having conversations before the season?
One piece is how quickly can we recover from outages. So having those consistent conversations with Centerpoint and really that pressure and holding them accountable. We work very well with them, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to hold them accountable. So this is one of those instances, seeing them, be quick in the response, be responsive to any reports of vital facilities. And as far as hurricane season, we move full speed ahead with the flood control projects that we have. Obviously, the city needs to do its work on the drains as well. We have the bayous and the channels. And then we're also just going through our exercises at this point. We're very well practiced. My concern, of course, is with this severe cuts that are coming from the Trump administration. What is that going to mean in terms of disaster recovery and in terms of these forecasts? And, I see a bit of a parallel. It's ironic between what's the indiscriminate cutting there and what's happening at the local level in terms of saying we're going to cut all this money and we're not really sure where from. I never thought that we would be following Trump administration fiscal irresponsibility strategies.
I know we want to jump into the funding and all of that in a second, but I just want to go back to something you just said to help clarify for those listening. Are you saying that more emphasis is put on recovery because we live in this area and we should expect these outages, or are you putting more focus on prevention so we don't have the outages to begin with?
Both, right? I mean, Centerpoint, we have followed up on them doing more work in terms of trimming tree limbs so that they don't fall on key infrastructure that they need. They have the generators, the ability to bring additional personnel. Of course, that's more on the recovery side. In terms of flooding, the prevention side are the flood control projects, and then the recovery side, that's where the federal administration comes in terms of FEMA. Last year, we had 3 federally declared disasters, and that meant FEMA could come in and provide very significant financial support to families to help them bridge, when the insurance kicks in or if they don't have home insurance, and then, of course, our flood insurance. And then, for Frank, the models from the National Weather Service, that's a prevention challenge.
Well, and to your point, we had 3 different problems last year. Emergencies, and it's like Thanksgiving dinner. Every person is different, and every storm is different. You can have a derecho, you can have a Beryl, you can have an Ike, you can have a Harvey, you can have a snowstorm that we covered.
That's right.
I mean, they're all different, so you can only do what you can do to prepare. I think the recovery is really where the rubber meets the road. And you look at what has happened with Helene and the recovery in North Carolina, and they've just been told by the Trump administration, sorry. What are you going to do when that happens?
I have to hope that our Republican leadership in Houston, Harris County will stand up and advocate for their own constituents. That has not necessarily been the case at the state level, right? When the state has attacked their constituents in Harris County. But I think that in terms of disaster response, the president may be immune to all kinds of criticism and scandal for whatever reason, but I don't think that that makes individual Republican members of Congress immune.
Well, and to your point, North Carolina is a very Republican state, and that's where all of the Helene damage occurred, and that's the state that has been told sorry. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, and we'll see what the fallout is from that. I think, what can I do? Right now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? We worked with the Trump administration during COVID, and of course, we had very serious differences in messaging, but they helped provide resources. We had a direct line of communication, and so my hope is that were that to happen, that we could advocate for the community, work in partnership, and get things done. Does this recovery from Helene bode well for Harris County? Not necessarily, but everything is different. Again, I would like to see the fallout on the local leadership from what's happening.
We're speaking with Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, and we're taking your calls at 713-440-8870. On the line, we have Ronnie from Pasadena. Ronnie, what's up?
Hi, I've got a question for the judge. With the Texas government on the verge of outlawing all THC products, is there anything that the city of Houston can do on behalf of business owners who are going to have to close shop, or those of us that use medical marijuana? Not medical marijuana, but you know what I mean, use marijuana for medical reasons?
I guess you mean the Harris County, not the city of Houston. So, Judge, if you can address that.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
correct.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, Ronnie. No, good question. We're certainly monitoring the legislature and everything that's coming down from that. I think that Ernie sort of hit on something with his question is that generally Harris County does not have ordinance making authority, but either way, I'll tell you, whenever we have tried to sort of find our way in around these state government mandates, generally what happens is we end up in court, and of course the Republican judges at the state level are very much incentivized to rule for the state, irrespective of whether they have a strong case or not, because we've seen in the past Attorney General Paxton come after judges that do not support him with great success. And so, I think it's more important right now to see what comes out of there, and then to the extent that there can be work done with legislators on the margins to protect communities that need this, that's probably the work that needs to be done.
Thank you for your call. Remember, if you have a question for the judge, 713-440-8870. I'd like to move you over to law enforcement, and there's a lot of talk about the county looking for law enforcement pay parity. Can you shed some light on what the plan is for Harris County and where the funding comes from for it?
Right. And so that's the concern, is there is no plan, right? We are committing to cuts without saying how we're going to do this. And so the concern is the following. The primary concern is, of course, we need to be able to recruit and retain not just law enforcement officers, but great law enforcement officers. That is a priority for any community. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And so, great, we agree on that. The question is, how are you going to pay for that? Because it costs money and it's a recurring cost. You're going to have those spots ongoing for the future. And so, the issue, of course, is the county is already facing around $130 million deficit, and then on top of that you're adding another $130 million cost for these races. So we're facing a $270 million deficit in this coming fiscal year, which, we talk about, throw numbers around, kind of normalize it, but it's not normal. I don't know that this has ever happened. It's certainly not the county that I inherited and have been presiding over. And sometimes you have to call people out whether they're in your party or not. And this is one where I'm going to say we had opportunities the past couple of years, last year in particular. We saw this train wreck coming. We saw the need for more pay. We had an opportunity to ask the community whether they would fund this pay, and I could not get a third vote to put that on the ballot and just ask, look, here's the issue. Would you be willing to go to this tax rate, still lower tax rate than it was ever under my predecessor? And so right now my concern is, okay, fine. Let's say we're going to do everything we can to provide these raises, but let's be transparent as to how, because I'll tell you, and I would like to talk about this if I have a chance in a minute, what the city is saying is itself extremely vague, and I'm afraid there's a little bit of wool over our eyes on both ends, just talking about things that sound real good without getting into the details.
But no matter how good it sounds or doesn't sound, you're faced with then having law enforcement who may shift over to the city, may go elsewhere. What do you do to retain? And I guess you do have to face the idea of raises there. How would you fund it?
So for me, I would first sit down and look at everything that's there and see what amount of cuts we can make. We have already done the efficiency studies. You know, we did that before. We have worked to really modernize a county that didn't even have a county administrator. That doesn't mean that there is no fat left to cut. And so that's why we're requesting departments to cut their operations by a certain percentage. But so let's just see what's there, what we need to tweak, and then see how much there is left to fund. And I would go to the voters with that. I would say, look, would you be willing to pay for this and an increase in the tax rate? And if not, then we'll just slash services by that much. I don't like having to do that right now when our back's against the wall, when we could have dealt with this in 2022, or we could have dealt with this last year. It is not a surprise. You don't just wake up one day with a $270 million deficit.
Do you have any say over, you mentioned tax rate. You could keep the tax rate the same and just increase all of the assessments of the properties. And so the $350,000 house is now assessed at $425,000, so that the tax rate effectively goes up without raising the tax rate, right? Just because the assessment goes up.
Yeah, and that's what was done before I took office, right? So everyone's up in arms about the taxes and the tax rate. And really what we've done is cut, and by everyone I mean my detractors, right, is we have cut the tax rate every year I've been in office. It's been lower than it was under my predecessor. What they used to do before I took office is the tax rate, as you said, would remain the same, but the value of the homes, they'd be valued higher, or the properties, and therefore more taxes would be collected. And so that's how the previous administration or administrations could say we are not increasing taxes. Now, we are not the ones in charge of those appraisals, which I think was your question, so I can't, there's a board that is in charge of that, independent of us. But what people have to remember is, I know that the tax bills, property taxes, are extremely high. But why are they extremely high? The bulk of the property tax bill is the public schools, because the state reduced its commitment to education several years ago. So if they used to pay, a high amount for education, they dropped it way down, and now they're upping it a little bit. But ultimately what's happening is the school districts are having to collect property taxes just for basic functions that the state used to help them cover. And so that's why I think the best thing to do is, rather than mandate, we're going to decide to put the tax rate here, which again, what I proposed last year was lower, right? But that doesn't mean the bill is lower. So how about we ask the voters? And that was my request last year.
You're listening to Hello Houston, and we are taking your calls now for Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo. Louise from Southwest Houston is on the line now with a question for Judge Hidalgo. Louise, welcome to Hello Houston.
Yes, hi, thank you. Two questions. One, how does somebody attend, is it called the county commission meetings? And how does somebody submit issues to them or questions? That's the first thing. Or commissioner's court, maybe that's what it's called. Mm-hmm. But the other one is on the topic of the property taxes. You just mentioned, Lina, that the board that is independent of the county that determines the appraisals. And the problem is that people are getting pushed out of their houses, and we have a severe shortage of moderate housing in Houston. So if they keep increasing the appraisals, obviously the taxes go up, even though the percentage might be the same.
Right.
How do we solve that problem? Who is on that board, and how do they get chosen? So two topics there.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions. So to answer your first question, you go to harriscountytx.gov. Our meetings take place on Thursdays at 10 a.m., and we generally begin with public speakers, and they take place every few weeks. So you'll see the calendar, and you can get information there about how to sign up to speak. Come by. It's in the first floor. We have a larger courtroom right now that comfortably accommodates all the folks that come to speak. As to the appraisal district, so because of a change in state law, the members of the appraisal district are now elected, or a majority of them are now elected. So that election took place, I want to say a few months ago. At this point, I think after COVID, all of us have our sense of time a little warped, but it's relatively recent. So we could vote for those folks. It's one of those things that, went really under the radar. And so I don't know that there's going to be really significant change there. I think that the key, to your point, in terms of the availability of housing is then, okay, we need more affordable housing. And there was, I want to say, a Kinder study done a couple years ago about how much more housing is necessary in Houston and Harris County for us to be able to accommodate the growth to where somebody can afford a home. It's not a giveaway. It's just if you work a job, normal salary to where you can actually afford it, and it's in the billions, right? And so that's where, and we're looking at cutting that. Well, we're working on that already with the city and with the county. So this is where it's all connected, and it's really important that everybody hold leaders accountable when we are pushing the can down the road and really limiting our budget options. So one of the things I want to add here, because what I've read about the city is as vague as what I'm reading about the county. And so I have a little bit more detail in terms of the city because there's a comptroller, right? Whereas we're still waiting to get our information. But for example, they're drawing down $100 million from the general fund in the city to paper over a deficit. It includes a 6% water rate increase. It includes over $17 million in vague savings with no explanations. It delays funding the city's future obligations, so pension and retiree healthcare obligations. That has been delayed again and again. So these are financial holes that are getting deeper that the city can't climb out of. And of course, what we know is the water bill is going to increase. We don't know by how much. And so it sounds real great, right? We're going to increase this, we're going to increase law enforcement, and we have quote unquote savings, but savings from where? And when you talk to the official who does the math, this is what you hear.
All right, I want to thank you, Louise, for that call. If you have a call or question for the judge, give us a call right now. We're speaking with Lina Hidalgo, Harris County Judge. Call us at 713-440-8870. I wanted to jump over to something that's also making an awful lot of headlines, and it's your trip to France. I guess the most recent update, if I'm staying up on my news, is that you had requested for some staff to be able to attend with you, and the Commissioner's Court is denying that.
Yeah, so it's a trade mission. It's the kind of thing that I figured it would become a political fight. I am wear the badge of honor that folks will come after me over things that they may not attack others over, because I call out things like this. And so it's a trade mission. There's a major conference there, technology, specifically AI, about 165,000 participants. We're coordinating with the Greater Houston Partnership, Rice University, the consulate there, government officials there. I mean, it's a very serious trade mission. And the idea, and I asked, this is not something that I came up with, it's something that they came to me with. And I said, why would we do a trade mission right now when the administration is saying, I don't want trade, right, and at the federal level? And the answer, I thought, was very wise, and it was, we need to make sure that we as a region are communicating our message, which is, come and invest here. And so we're having business leaders from various industries, as well as cultural philanthropy, go and speak with counterparts. And that's really how these deals are made, as you put people in a room, and then you have opportunities for exchange, and eventually, ideally, there are additional investments in our region, which means additional revenue, which means additional ability to cover services. So it's totally fine. My budget is very small compared to that of my colleagues. It's about $10 million, including the Office of Emergency Management. Theirs, if you include the toll road money, about $70 million. And so I just said, can I use some of my travel budget, which is already budgeted, to send some staff to the trade mission with me, because I can't possibly manage all of this on my own. And the answer was no, which is just bizarre, because each office really, there's not a precedent for the court saying to another member of Commissioner's Court, you can't use your budget for what you say you want to use it for.
In the past judges, when they've gone on similar trips, has their staff been able to go, and have they been funded?
I don't know. And I know in the past, for example, is the question about security detail. Well, how come your predecessor didn't have a security detail and you do? Well, look, I've received many threats. I'm more visible. I don't know that they participated in this or not, but the way these trade missions work is, you bring staff. We had requested per my security detail that information not be shared about where I was going until I returned, but of course that was leaked. And then even at our Commissioner's Court meeting, some of the folks that are, that will sort of chase after me and harass me and whatnot said, folks from that group said, okay, we'll see you in Paris, right? So, I can say, look, I'm gonna pay for it out of my campaign funding, which is, what I could do. The problem is my staff would then have to take vacation time and not be paid for their work. So, it's just a game. I'd rather, focus on the budget and these big issues. I think it's a little bit, attempts at bullying, but at this point I have pretty thick skin, and I saw it coming. And so, unfortunately my staff's a little frustrated, but I told them from the start, I was like, you guys, they're just going to make a whole thing of it. It's okay. We're going to be okay.
Judge Hidalgo, do you feel like you're held to a different standard than other counterparts and previous judges?
Yeah, that's obvious. But again, it's because of what we've achieved. We got so much done with, even despite responding to all these emergencies that Frank was referencing earlier, from the floods, the fires, the derecho, COVID, of course. And as you know, my election flipped the makeup of the political makeup of the Commissioner's Court for the first time in 30 years. People see that I have a future, and what's surprising to me is the attacks from fellow Democrats. But I think there's this fear. This is my theory, right? I'm not in their heads, but I think there's this fear of again, political repercussions. But if I've learned anything is if you're true to yourself, to what's right, you can win. We won re-election and it was just fine, and you don't need to sink the whole budget in order to do that.
And to your point about security, you've been in place almost 10 years now.
This is my 7th year. Yeah.
7th year. But the world has changed a lot in just 7 years.
But Judge Hidalgo, I want to go back to something that you said. You said it's obvious. Why is it so obvious to you?
I think people can see that, right? Just basically anything I do. I remember one time we had an exchange with a colleague about this was, I guess, 2019 or anyway, before when Commissioner Ramsey wasn't there yet, and one of the commissioners slammed his hand on the table, and then I have a colleague that just won't look at me, and another one that's a cuss in a church, but nobody's reading any of that in the news, right? But look, it's fine. I think it's part of being able to make a difference. I know I'm having an impact, and at this point, with my experience and of course my diagnosis and treatment for anxiety and depression, I'm at a point where and then of course the false prosecution of my staff members. It's like, what's a worse thing that could possibly happen to you in politics is, to be afraid of being jailed for something you didn't do, right? I mean, it was just terrifying. At this point, this stuff is like really small potatoes.
Which I would imagine people from other cities, when they look at Harris County, they see Harris County as a very Democrat. People think of Houston as very progressive, and that there would be a lot of support behind you. So what do you say when people look at us and from other cities that might be listening to this and might be actually quite surprised that this is the type of treatment you've received?
Yeah, I mean, we see it with prevalent leaders anywhere. I think the political prosecution speaks to the pretty unlimited power, unchecked, certainly, power of prosecutors around the country. I think at the federal level, generally, we know that there were checks against this that now the Trump administration is trying to get rid of. So I think that's why we haven't seen political prosecutions of members of Congress and such until now. And as far as us being a Democratic region or not, I mean, it's been hard fought. We've been able to win it by a lot some years. Obviously, the Republican Party still believes that they can win it back. I think that's certainly a possibility. But I don't think that... I think, I have a very strong standing among the Democratic Party, certainly more centrist Republicans. I'm very pragmatic, but certainly they've been very successful. $25 million campaign in my reelection, a real strong focus on criticizing me. They've been rather successful at framing me as sort of a out-of-touch leftist. When if you look at the policies, I mean, I'm the one advocating for a balanced budget, right? And this has been, I was able to maintain that until my Republican colleague, two of them were the ones that boycotted the budget and limited law enforcement funding 2022. And then, there's three of my colleagues this past year that wouldn't allow us to keep a balanced budget. So, but that's politics. I mean, that is just politics. And I'm not going to say I love it, but I don't not enjoy it, Like, I love that I know how to deal with it, and I have those skills now, and I can just go home and play with my cat and live my best life.
There is a question on YouTube. And speaking of anxiety, Alex Garza says, "Hi, Judge. How do you counter Texas anti-LGBTQ plus laws while advancing inclusive policies to ensure Harris County remains a safe, equitable place for the LGBTQ plus community? June is Pride Month. Take it away."
Yeah, thank you. No, June is Pride Month. It's exciting. Some people say, the Pride Parade's a parade. What's that for? And I think step number one, of course, is just being very vocal about tolerance in our region, and really no matter what the group is, but particularly those groups that are coming under attack, like the LGBT community. So you'll continue to see us do that. I've heard from county employees that just us being able to talk about it, to have a Pride Month resolution, for example, that makes them feel more comfortable and is changing the culture at the county worker level. So I'm hoping that helps also countywide, but policy-wise as well. We established a 12-week paid family leave for both parents in the case of a birth of a child. That applies, of course, for same-sex couples or otherwise. We have other policies, including an advisory board that helps us come up with county policies around that. You can be sure we're not scrubbing our websites or our programs based on that. Better not talk about it too much before they try to legislate against us. So look, we are always very creative. We have a very creative staff, county attorney. I can promise you we'll do everything we can in terms of specific attacks, and we're not people are going to shy away from a fight with the state.
Judge, thank you for coming in.
Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo. Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll dive into the big topics of the day and take your calls at 713-440-8870. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, From Bambi to Rebel Without a Cause, discover the art, life, and enduring impact of renowned Chinese-American painter Tyrus Wong. Watch American Masters tonight at 8 on TV8 or stream on the PBS app.
Support comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact.
Support comes from Miller Outdoor Theater, presenting Solumbum Houston Dance Company, celebrating the legacy of King and Gandhi Friday, and the Texas Medical Center Orchestra with Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto and more on Saturday. Open to the public. Info at milleroutdoortheater.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from IL Texas, helping to prepare students for leadership roles in the international community by emphasizing servant leadership, language immersion, and character building. More at iltexas.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from UpReach Learning, offering summer academic boot camps designed to improve students' learning skills over the summer. Programs available for K through 12th grade. Registration info at upreachlearning.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management. Estimates and more at CertaPro.com.
Support comes from Rice University's Baker Institute, offering a forum for informed, nonpartisan, civic-minded engagement on the most pressing issues facing Texas, the U.S., and the world. More information about becoming a member is at bakerinstitute.org/membership.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello, Houston.
Hello,
so much
Houston.
to chat about.
So much to talk about.
That's
We
what
just
we're
had
doing.
the judge in here, and we were very excited about that. We didn't get to mention that we do stream live on YouTube, so if you'd wanted to see the judge, you could have watched it there. We do archive, though, a lot of the interviews that happen on the show, so go to our YouTube channel, which you can find at Houston Public Media right there on YouTube, or just go to our page, hellohouston.org, and all the information's there. Interesting conversation with the judge.
I wanted to ask her about how tariffs might affect, especially out of Mexico, might affect Harris County itself, because we depend on a lot of imported products. I mean, just where do we get the orange cones and barrels you see everywhere, and uniforms for our city and our county workers? And there's a lot that comes into this county and the city from other places.
Yeah. Well,
and
it's a
that really has
problem.
not been addressed, because I don't know that anybody knows the answer, to be honest.
A problem we always face in these things is we only have so much time. They've got packed schedules. We're lucky we got the time we got. We're very thankful. Thank you for doing it, Judge. And other elected officials, you're invited to come in here and have a platform to talk and to face ours and your questions.
And I also feel like we need to have her back on from Paris and talk to us about that, because that sounds like that's going to be fascinating in learning and understanding how we can mitigate this situation locally.
And weather conferences, the TV weather people, we always have our conferences in Tulsa and Wilmington. The one this year is in Boise. I think because it's in Paris, people say, well, she just wants to go to Paris. I think it's you're pointing out discriminatory. I think it's very sexist in a way.
Well, yeah. I mean,
if a man wanted to go to Paris, a man goes to Paris.
It's been very interesting for me as a young Latina woman watching Judge Lina Hidalgo locally rise up, and just her story. And from a non-political standpoint, it is, I think, representation matters. And so in many ways, it's one of those things where I'm like, absolutely. Now, I understand it's very, she can be controversial, and she has become more outspoken during her second term, which, again, she toes a line that I think a lot of women do often. In whether you're in a public situation or just going to work, sometimes women face different challenges and are held to different standards across industries.
I think you're absolutely right.
What are your thoughts on the conversation we had with the judge? Give us a call, 713-440-8870. Also, coming up in the next hour, I just want to plug this again. We are going to take apart and find out all the ins and outs of Trump's big, beautiful bill. We've heard a lot in the news about it, but what's fact? What's fiction? What does it cut? What does it hold on to? We're going to have Bob Stein here with us from Rice University, and we want your questions. So feel free to call us, 713-440-8870, or email those questions questions starting now at talk@hellohouston.org so we can really dig into it and we can make sure we ask your concerns in our questions. Frank, it came up in the judge conversation. It comes up all the time. Our weather.
I know.
And it came up last night as I heard that.
And it was well forecast. I watched the weather, looked at the weather, and I think all the TV folks did a great job of saying this is what's going to be coming and this is when it's going to be coming.
Did you expect the power outages, though, that many?
Always.
Oh,
always.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We used to always track that, on television. So it doesn't surprise me.
It surprised me this morning to wake up and hear how much was out.
I was going to say, I feel like it's getting worse. I mean, I feel like
the
power outages, or maybe the way the storms are coming in, Frank, but I don't understand why it feels like we have slight wind. And I'm seeing on my socials, people are like, we just lost power. We just lost power.
That may be true, and maybe have to do with the infrastructure. And as the judge was saying, the limbs. People always say, oh, yeah, I'll take care of that. And then they don't want to take care of that because they get this shaved look in their backyard where all of those wires are. So
we're going to need to get Centerpoint in here.
I'd love
That's
to
a good one.
That's a good one. We're going to get Centerpoint in here.
Well, that's a good one. Tonight, tomorrow, what are we looking at real quick weather-wise?
You know what? I think we're okay tonight. Tomorrow, we may see some scattered stuff. Wednesday afternoon, that's another round of severe weather with the system coming up from the south and one coming in from the west. And when you get two different wind directions like that, that's when you get to a tornado threat. So it wouldn't surprise me if they issued a tornado watch on Wednesday. I'm not going to say that out loud, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I think you just did. I just want to let you know.
You know what I mean.
Anyway, we're always interested in what you think. Give us a call. Celeste, we missed it at the top of the show because the judge was already here, so we went right into it. But let's take a look at some of the news that's in the headlines.
A proposal to allow smaller homes on smaller lots in Texas cities, part of a slew of bills intended to tame the state's high home prices and rent, is back from the dead after a procedural move killed it in the Texas House Sunday. Senate Bill 15, a top priority of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who leads the Senate, would reduce the amount of land cities require for single-family homes in new subdivisions. That would give home builders the flexibility to build smaller homes on less land, reducing the final cost of the home. The state needs 320,000 more homes than it has, according to an estimate by the housing advocacy group Up for Growth. As a result, home prices and rents have skyrocketed, housing advocates and experts say. Do you feel like this is something that we're moving in the right direction? What are your thoughts about smaller homes and smaller lots to make housing affordable in Texas? Now's the time to give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Okay, I'm going to take an interesting twist on this one and go right to you, Frank, for this. I'm concerned smaller lots, more homes, less green space, more flooding.
Correct. Absolutely. And the other concern is when you do that, you also, because I read the bill, and there's no, with certain building guidelines, we all have our houses that all look kind of nice and they're all evenly spaced, say 25 feet from the curb, and they all have that requirement. This would say, no, you can't do that. You can build it any way you want on 4,000 square feet of land.
I mean, but nowadays, builders will put 4 units on a piece of land.
Right.
So I kind of feel like that, to me, we're giving people options, giving builders more flexibility on what type of homes they have. I think it's good that, this is a way to get more people access to homes. Now, my question about flooding, though, is not every area floods. I mean, what if these are people building out in the suburbs?
And if you put good retention ponds with those buildings, like they did for Habitat for Humanity, which they could take a page out of their playbook, because Habitat homes are 1 story, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, big living room, kitchen, dining area. I mean, they're about 1,500 square feet, but they sometimes do have to be on more land. But you could build that kind of a home very quickly and efficiently, and on a smaller parcel of land.
Right.
So they might actually look at that playbook.
It's also assuming that home builders are going to want to do these lesser priced homes, because if the money is in the bigger homes, why would they essentially say, okay, well, now I'm going to start
sales? They're cheaper. They can build more.
Cheaper by the
they'll
dozen.
sell more.
Unless they're required, I'm not sure, to be in a certain, I don't know, unless there's a policy.
Well,
that
the land
requires
is about
them to.
25% of the cost of the home, right?
Yeah.
So if you can reduce that 25% by half, then presumably, if the land is $100,000, you can make it $50,000 and still build a $250,000 home on it, and you have a $300,000 home. And that's the limit of what's considered lower income. So below 300 is a lower income house, which still is a pretty nice place.
Expensive.
Yeah.
Share your thoughts with us, 713-440-8870. Here's one we can have a little fun with, I think. Texas Senate has passed a bill that would move the state to permanent daylight savings time, ending the long-standing tradition of spring forward and fall back. House Bill 1393, authored by Republican Representative Will Metcalf of Conroe, aims to eliminate the time change by keeping Texas on daylight savings time year-round. The Senate passed the bill Thursday afternoon on a vote of 27-4. The measure cleared the Texas House last month and now heads to Governor Abbott's desk for approval. What do you folks think? 713-440-8870.
Big mistake.
I go back and forth. This time.
I think it's funny. It's not just putting the time back to what the time is. It's putting it into an artificial time of daylight savings time.
Well,
Set
look,
it there.
It's smart to go ahead and get this bill passed, because if the United States government, on the federal level, passes it, and we don't meet again for 2 years, at least we're
that's
caught
a
up.
good point.
You know, we're ready. We're ready, because if the feds don't pass it, it's not effective at all. The bill gets thrown out the window. But if they do, then we're ready. My problem is that means that from December 2nd to February 15th, the sun is going to come up after 8 o'clock in the morning.
I'm fine with that.
Well, but you don't have kids trying to walk to school or go to the bus stop.
That's exactly my point. With young kids, I really dislike it.
I bet.
Because I try to get my kids to bed right now, and they're like, it's daylight outside.
I was the same way.
I'm like, it's still, it's daylight out. I mean, it makes bedtime tough. It really does. And I'm like, no, really, it's nighttime. And like the birds are chirping.
Yeah. Well, in the late fall and winter and early spring, we'll have a sunset instead of at 5:30. It'll be at 6:30, which that's nice. You're getting home because people can't drive in the dark. The problem is the mornings. Everybody commuting from 6:30 until 8 o'clock are going to be doing so in the dark.
Are we in daylight savings right now?
Yes.
Okay. I get confused.
My theory has always been nothing fun happens while the sun is still out. So I'm all for the dark. I live in the dark. I like the dark.
Oh, by the way, just to recall, an email on the homes, when builders put 2 houses on a 5,000 square foot lot that had 1 house, there's no public parking. That's true, because the driveways go right into the garage when you do townhouses like that. They're absolutely right. And that's what happened on my street, which is narrow anyway. That's from Dorsa and Houston Heights.
Wow, that's a good point. And the parking is just becoming a nightmare.
And we also got...
Didn't we have a bill that said if you built a public building, not talking about houses, but that you had to provide parking for it? That was around for a while. Wasn't that a city ordinance, and then it kind of disappeared again?
It was a good one. I don't recall.
Yeah, I think it's a great one. But anyway.
We also got a text to Andrew Holding Builders from Andrew. Says holding builders are not incentivized to build smaller, more affordable homes. They all want to build big homes to make more money from the land.
What you were saying.
That's kind of what I was saying.
It won't matter how small the land.
We're assuming that these builders are going to want to do that.
Well, we're assuming they're going to build low price housing. They're just going to build these taller, thinner palaces on these smaller lots and still charge.
And that's what they do now.
And without much code. If you look at this bill, it's like there's no real code for setbacks, or they can pretty much do what they want to do as far as getting a house built.
So I'm guessing people are more concerned about the size of lots and houses than they are about daylight savings time from the response.
I'm telling you, it's a big mistake. That's why it did not work when we tried to do it in the 70s.
I spoke too soon. We got a text from Melinda in Katy, who said, I don't like permanent daylight savings time since it doesn't align with circadian rhythm. Very good point.
Circadian rhythm.
Yes.
Like
that one.
Okay. Well, we didn't have... People were around a long time before we started changing the clocks back. So I'm not sure circadian. I don't understand.
And we all believe in that whole idea about it's farmers and all that. And it turned out to just be a
Ben Franklin said back in his day we could save so much wax paraffin if we changed the clocks. Which he didn't even have a clock.
Yeah, but that wax paraffin came in handy. Okay, Frank, take us to your story.
Well, The Texas Lottery, we've talked about this before, you know, the way they have these businesses that will sell you lots and lots of lottery tickets. Well, state lawmakers have tried to decide the future of that. There's a Texas woman who I think legitimately won $83.5 million from the Lotto Texas jackpot. She's asking a judge to order the acting executive director of the commission to pay out the winnings. I don't blame her.
They should.
And she's known as Jane Doe. She's probably afraid of being known as really rich. She purchased this winning ticket through a lottery courier service known as Jackpot. That's a courier service that we've talked about on this show. It allows players to purchase a ticket over the phone via an app without having to go into the store, right? So you can just do this on your app. She purchased $20 worth of tickets, and she won the jackpot on February 17th. She and her attorney presented the winning ticket to the Texas Lottery Commission on March 18th. So a month later, she still has not been paid. Her attorney, Randy Howery, said the commission told him and his client back in March that the winnings may not be paid out, pending a Texas Rangers investigation into her lottery drawing and another drawing from April 2023. Now, I guess this stems from the idea that people were trying to cheat the system and
right,
had
but
too
let's
many
be
things
clear
set up.
here.
That
That's
seem like
a
the same
very
thing.
separate thing. There was an organization went in, got the machine. We did a whole thing while you guys were out about the Texas Lottery Commission, again, about what happened with that story. And so those were machines that were rented, used, there was programming. This woman simply used an app on her phone to buy. I have one of those lotto apps on my phone where I can buy my tickets on my phone. I did it once. They gave me a credit. I never even went back and used the credit. But that seems perfectly legit. And to hold this woman's winnings, she purchased a random ticket. She didn't buy a million of them.
From what I understand, so to me, Jackpot just sounds a bit scammy, all in general. To me, the question is, did Jackpot get paid anything from the winnings first?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because they made 5%, right?
Right.
Because stores that sell them, they get a percentage. That's
5%.
the incentive.
Correct.
So I'm sure it will, but if no money's been paid out yet, I would guess they haven't yet.
They haven't yet. So to me, it's like one of those, when you book a flight through one of those third party and all of a sudden something happens in the airline and you're like, well, I want my money back. And they're like, sorry, this isn't my deal.
Well, what if you book that same plane ticket using your app versus going into a travel agency and saying, I need to buy a ticket here in person?
I'm going to full out say it. I don't see anything wrong with her not getting paid the money.
Not
Really?
getting paid?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have that ticket, do you?
Well, no. I mean, my thought is that she went through a third party. There's a huge investigation. They've paused it. As long as Jackpot has not received any funds, you know, I think it's one of those things where tough luck.
But wasn't the third party legitimate and legal?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Not like StubHub. What if you went to your concert with a StubHub ticket and they said, sorry, this won't get you in?
It happens all the time. Well, no. If there was an investigation and StubHub said the concert has been canceled, and you're saying, I want to still see the concert.
Well, no, you just
I
want
want
your
my money.
Right.
They're
I
gonna
think
say,
the
"No,
difference
sorry."
here is with StubHub, they're buying a group of tickets and then selling them to you. Here, I don't believe that this service buys a bunch of lottery tickets and then as you sign up and want a lottery ticket, you get their ticket. I think they don't purchase it until you purchase it, and they purchase it on your behalf, which I think is a very different thing.
It's not
right.
like $1.25 for a $1 ticket, right?
So
there may be a service charge. There may be a previous.
Jackpot did say that they have been operating in Texas since 2019 with full transparency and compliance with guidance from the Texas Lottery Commission. And it said, despite our proven track record of compliance and commitment to be responsible gaming, the Texas Lottery Commission has issued a new policy prohibiting our service effectively immediately.
But when is that?
So this was back in February 25th of 2025.
And she bought her ticket
February
on February 17th, 2025.
So she should be paid.
Pay the woman the money.
Okay, so it goes February 17th.
I have
February
one thing to
25.
say about all this. Every one of you listening right now has won the lottery because we're back for another hour coming up. Celeste, what's coming up on this show?
That's right. Coming up. After the break, we will talk to Rice University's Bob Stein about President Trump's big, beautiful bill. Stay with us.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston Daily Newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Scan Health Plan, a not-for-profit Medicare Advantage plan that has been dedicated to the health and independence of their members since 1977. More information at scanhealthplan.com. Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, with the generous support from our founding sponsor, Kathy Sanders.
We have about a 30% chance of maybe a shower or thunderstorm this afternoon. The high getting up to near 90. It's 81. This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we continue diving into today's top stories, including President Trump threatening to send $3 billion of Harvard's grant money to trade schools over claims that the university inadequately addressed anti-Semitism on campus. I'm Frank Billingsley.
And I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman. We'll also talk with Bob Stein, a Rice University political science professor, about President Trump's big, beautiful bill.
And I'm Ernie Manouse. Plus, we'll learn more about Skyfarm at Post Houston, a 1-acre rooftop food farm that makes a part of the Houston Entertainment Hub's Skyline.
And we want to hear from you, so give us a call at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to houstonpublicmedia.org and click the big orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Trump administration is asking federal agencies to cancel their remaining federal contracts with Harvard University. The administration accuses Harvard of anti-Semitism, which the school denies. NPR's Alyssa Nadwarny reports the contracts are estimated to be worth about $100 million.
A letter from the U.S. General Services Administration dated Tuesday tells agencies to review current contracts with Harvard and terminate or find an alternative vendor. The letter asks agencies to submit a list of contracts they have terminated with the university by June 6th. This is in addition to the more than $2 billion the administration has already frozen. Harvard has not yet responded to NPR's request for comment. The school is suing the Trump administration to block the federal funding freeze. The university claims that the administration's moves are unlawful and that the cuts threaten academic freedom and First Amendment rights. Alyssa Nadwarny, NPR News.
President Trump spent Memorial Day carrying out a presidential tradition. He paid tribute to deceased military service members with a wreath and a speech at Arlington National Cemetery. But as NPR's Medical Montanaro reports, Trump's remarks on social media struck a very different tone.
Memorial Day, first of all, is a day to remember those who died during active duty in the military. It's not a day to tell people happy Memorial Day, but that's what Trump did 3 times on social media, wishing a happy Memorial Day to, quote, including the scum that spent the last 4 years trying to destroy our country through warped radical left minds.
NPR's Domenico Montanaro reporting. Consumers seem to be expressing more confidence about the U.S. economic outlook after the administration suspended some of its most punishing tariffs. NPR's Scott Horsley reports this marks the first uptick in confidence in 6 months.
A new survey from the nonprofit Conference Board shows a 14% jump in the group's confidence index. Survey respondents are feeling better about both the current economic situation and prospects for the future. About half the survey responses came in after the U.S. and China agreed to a temporary truce in their trade war. That also gave a boost to the stock market, which contributed to the stronger confidence numbers. People are still jittery that the president's tariffs will lead to higher prices, although some spoke favorably about cheaper gasoline. Survey respondents are also nervous about the job market, despite the low unemployment rate. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
If you're planning to book a flight on Southwest, today's your last chance to do it without being charged for checked bags. The airline plans to start imposing fees on most passengers Wednesday, reportedly $35 for the first bag, $45 for the second. For decades, Southwest boasted a 2 free bags policy that it said set it apart from its discount rivals. That all ends tomorrow. It's NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. The Texas legislative session is due to end this week. It only meets every 2 years. James Henson is the director of the Texas Politics Project. He says supporters of the current system say they are in favor of limited government.
Look, we don't want government doing more. Government does plenty, whether it's the federal government or state government. And this isn't something that's broken. We've made it this far.
He says opponents of Texas's system have argued for the legislators to meet every year or have longer legislative sessions. Henson said there hasn't been enough support for that road over the years to make any significant changes. Texas Children's Hospital and Houston's Medical Center says it's seeing more kids than ever in its emergency room because of behavioral health issues. News 88.7's Colleen de Guzman talked to a pediatric psychologist who says it's an indication the mental health crisis among young people is getting worse.
Nearly 650 children went to the hospital's ER in April because of behavioral health issues, such as depression and suicidal ideation. That's nearly 200 more than the hospital usually gets in a month. Dr. Marnie Axelrad is a pediatric psychologist at Texas Children's and Baylor College of Medicine. She told Houston Matters there are signs parents can look for.
If your child is avoiding things or really seeming more emotional or more irritable than usual, that could indicate emotional distress.
Axelrad adds changes in sleeping patterns and academic performances are also signs. I'm Colleen de Guzman, News 88.7.
And Houston police are still looking for someone accused of shooting and killing a man on a Metro bus late last week. ABC 13 reports that this happened after an argument between the two people escalated. There were multiple passengers aboard the bus. It's 79 degrees, partly sunny with a chance of thunderstorms. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, committed to giving job listings increased visibility with relevant candidates through its sponsored jobs feature. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
From Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
And we are back. It's the noontime hour on Hello Houston. Hope you're enjoying your day. If you have a question, comment, we're going to be taking apart that one big beautiful bill that President Trump helped move through the House right before Memorial Day. So we're taking your questions, comments, concerns about it. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Passed by one vote.
Passed by one vote.
One vote.
Yeah, it was close. Somebody was sweating it out.
That big, beautiful vote.
That big, beautiful vote. That one big, beautiful vote. We'll be talking about that with Bob Stein in just a moment. So get your questions in. You can either call us, as I said, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Before we get to all of that, we're back. You folks are back with me because you were off for 2 days right before the holiday, Celeste and Frank. Curious, what did you guys do on your Memorial Day?
I flew out to Colorado for my niece's high school graduation.
Oh, lovely.
And it was beautiful, and we saw family.
She's beautiful. I saw the pictures.
Yes, my sweet girl
Your
Ava.
whole family's just beautiful. I don't know.
Thank you, Frank. I'd like to think so. But, it was great. And then we were flying out of Denver on Sunday evening. Our flight was supposed to leave at 5:30, and we did not depart until like 12:30.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was top 3, one of the most turbulent flight I've ever been on. And I was holding on to my seat praying. My kids were sound asleep, and
I was
Dan
just going to
and
ask,
I
how was it
looked at each
traveling with
other.
2 kids with that kind of a
My
delay?
kids are great travelers. Like they're great, and we're also getting into that sweet spot, that age. But the turbulence it felt like we never got out of the clouds.
Yeah.
And it was just.
That
Frank,
does me in.
you traveled too. How was your
I was
traveling?
in PV, yeah, Puerto Vallarta. We went down there. Our flights were fine. And I was a little nervous for yesterday because of the storms that were on the way and some that had come through on Memorial Day itself. Mm-hmm. But they got from Hobby, there's one Southwest does one flight there and one flight back. 108 goes there and 109 comes back, right? And so they really want to get that plane out of here and down there, and they don't want to leave their crew down there if they can help it. So they do everything to make those flights work, and so far they always have. And so,
how long is the flight down there?
2 hours.
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
I spent the weekend.
3 episodes of Suits.
I spent the weekend monitoring the news and watching the news because I was fascinated about what was going on in Congress. And that was the one big, beautiful bill, which led us to wondering, we hear so much about it, but what actually does it say?
There's
so
a
much
lot.
of what we learn is partisan these days, and you hear it from your silo or someone else's silo. What really is in it? So with the passage of that one big, beautiful bill through at least the House, it proposes, as we understand, cuts to Medicaid and SNAP programs, as well as sweeping tax cuts. The bill barely made it through the House, as we mentioned. So what's in it? Well, one person who can help us walk through it is Bob Stein. He's the Lina Goldman Fox Professor of Political Science at Rice University. He's here to discuss it with us right now, but we also want you to be part of this conversation. So call us or text us 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Bob, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Where we have got to start with this one is what we're hearing in the news, be it it is the greatest thing ever to happen or it is a horrible nightmare of a bill. What's the reality of what is actually in this bill?
Well, sufficient to say it in many ways changes a lot of what we've known to be government at the federal level and will spill over to the state and local level. So in some respects, it greatly reflects President Trump's many, now well over 100 executive orders. And the simple way to say it is to change what we think the federal government should be doing, what it is doing, and its relationship not only with state and local, but with people. Now, there are details. It's 2,000 pages.
Wow.
I'm embarrassed to admit that I've been through the 2,000 pages. I use an AI chat, actually, to go through it. And there are things in there that have not been reported in the press. And not because I think, what's the president call it? The fake press or the non-fake press.
Fake news.
Is being partisan. It's incredibly complicated. Later on, you'll want to ask me about taxing Medicaid expenditures as a vehicle for cutting overall federal spending. But this is a bill that is a real clash, not only, I think, between people's view of what the federal government should do in Washington, but there are some cultural and social issues here. So the big from 10,000 feet is that unlike what the president and the Republican Party, or at least the majority in the House and Senate have been saying, it doesn't cut the deficit. It actually increases it. You can debate the point about how much it increases it, but we're talking about not billions, but trillions of dollars over the next decade. What that means is that around July, maybe even late August, the Congress is going to have to, and the president sign, a debt ceiling increase. There's no question here that this bill out of the House raises the debt. And that's one of the big clashes. Now, how it does that is in a variety of ways, not the least of which is it continues President Trump's 2017 cut in tax rates, which, of course, had its most positive effect on people who make money. And let me say this. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we favor the wealthy over the poor. The simple fact of the matter is wealthy people make more money. Mm-hmm. That's why they're wealthy. Therefore, if you reduce tax rates, you're going to disproportionately benefit wealthy people. Now, I'm not here to debate whether that's right or wrong.
Right.
There are many economists will say that reducing taxes on the wealthy means that the wealthy will spend more money, which will generate more jobs and opportunities for other people. We can debate that. It's not absolutely true. Sufficient to say that people who are poor or lower income and don't make much money will not benefit as much from reductions in tax rates. In fact, they can't go below, we don't have a negative tax. By that, I mean, we don't offer guaranteed incomes to people. So again, a lot of the rhetoric here doesn't speak to what the tax or the continuation of the 217 tax bill will do. But trust me, politically, were you not to continue the 217 tax cuts, you have a lot of backlash.
Does it disproportionately tax lower income folks, or is it
well, it doesn't disproportionately tax them. Where the rhetoric from the Democrats, I think, holds water is that if you not only continue these tax cuts and then cut benefits from middle and lower income voters and citizens, then the overall burden is much greater on them.
Well, there's also the argument from one side that it doesn't cut benefits, that it gets rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, but it doesn't cut services. What is actually in the bill?
So the bill doesn't actually cut Medicaid expenditures, except in one area, which I'll get to it in a moment, and will be difficult for me to explain. Where it may have the effect of cutting is that it now requires that a person who is receiving Medicaid benefits re-enroll twice a year rather than once a year. So every year, if you're receiving Medicaid benefits, you have to file paperwork, can be done online, demonstrating that your income is at the level acceptable for Medicaid expenditures, that you have a residence, and that you meet other requirements, including either disability, sole support for a minor, or yourself caring for somebody who is disabled or otherwise unable to provide for themselves. Doing it twice a year increases the risk that people will be pushed off, that they will not file properly. They won't file at all. We're talking about people who are in low income categories who also may not have access to the internet, may not have access to their local Social Security department, which of course has been cut back. So they're likely to be qualified, but by adding on this burden of twice a year re-enrollment, you're now increasing the chances that some people who are perfectly legitimate and eligible for federal aid, Medicaid, won't get it. They'll be pushed off.
Well,
number two,
this burden of getting free money, right? I mean, let's not forget that point of it. I see that having to re-enroll twice might be a pain in the neck, but it's to help you, and it's free. So I don't see it as.
Let me be clear here. It's not money. I want to be very clear, Frank. It is not money. It is your right to go to a doctor and hospital to get medical care. Where does that money go, Frank? Question mark. Where does the money go that a recipient of Medicaid is knocking on the door of a St. Luke's, MD Anderson? It goes into the hands of the hospital.
Sure.
The doctors, the nurses. That's important because that becomes an incredibly important stakeholder. The people that work at MD Anderson, the men and women that provide you health care, are not themselves probably low-income Medicaid eligible. So we got to understand how the system works. Frank Billingsley has a bad staph infection. He goes to St. Luke's. He's Medicaid eligible. Medicaid pays not Frank, not even a penny. He just is eligible to get medical care from the hospital. The hospital actually files all the paperwork for him. Frank is right to say, is it really burdensome to ask somebody to prove that they're eligible every 6 months versus every year? I'll let others decide that. All I'm saying is that when you're dealing with the poor, who are the people who are eligible for Medicaid, elderly particularly, they're more likely to still be qualified, but as we point out, may not remember, may not have the paperwork, and may fail to reapply.
But to Ernie's point, is it a matter of making sure that the people that are applying are taking the time to do it, and the people that need help are getting the help they need, as opposed to it is trying to get rid of some of the waste and abuse and the fraud involved? Or is it maybe it's a mix of both?
Let me say this. The Dodge people, which is Elon Musk group, have yet to report any significant element of user fraud. Now, let me be clear here. There's no question there's probably fraud in the Medicaid system, but it's not on the part of the people who are the users.
Okay, so income. the double signing up wouldn't solve that problem.
No,
right.
No. The problem there are, how can I say, questionable doctors, questionable hospitals, questionable sellers or purveyors of appliances such as wheelchairs, oxygen equipment. They're the people who are, when Frank comes in, instead of putting Frank in for one visit, these are doctors and hospitals and medical suppliers who, how can I say, fraudulently apply for more than one visit. But the question is, would there be significant fraud detection with a 6-month versus a 12-month? And the research that's been done on that would suggest no, that the people who are most needy, that is to say sickest, least capable of providing for themselves, poorest, are most likely to fall through the cracks on this one. Again, if you think that a 6-month is not an unreasonable demand, then you put it in. But the evidence is at this point that requiring a every 6 month or twice a year enrollment doesn't catch any fraud, and more than likely will knock off other people. The other one,
I'm going to jump in real quick here and just remind folks we're speaking to Bob Stein. We're talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is the Trump proposal to save money and to balance our budget, but actually, as we already established, will increase it. We're curious what you think. Give us a call. Questions you may have for Bob, give us a call, 713-440-8870. I want to follow up just quickly on what you were talking about with Frank and his staph infection. What happens in the real world? So somebody doesn't get on Medicare, or Medicaid. They still get that infection. They still go to a hospital. What happens?
Well, if it's a federally supported hospital, which that is to say they receive any federal funds, either in their construction, to the doctors, to the equipment they buy, they are required by law to provide medical assistance. They then recoup those costs as best they can. In our hospital district called Harris Health, if you go to a hospital in this city and get assistance and are able to pay for it, either through insurance, Medicaid, or cash, the hospital district absorbs that. And that means that taxpayers of Harris County do. And if you look at the 254 counties in the state, the 3,000 in the country, all of them have hospitals. All of them are dependent on Medicaid, Medicare, that's for the elderly, which I just signed up for.
Me too. Me too.
Oh yeah, I at 75 I finally qualify. I'm retired in July. 46 years seem to be long enough for me to bore my students. But seriously, I think the problem here is not necessarily and only the members of our society who get Medicaid coverage. It's all the people that benefit. The way to think about this is there are people who receive Medicaid benefits, and there are people who are beneficiaries of Medicaid. And I would argue that the beneficiaries, hospitals, doctors, nurses, other technical lab people, they are the ones that will be adversely affected by some of these changes. Which means what? That it's possible when you get out to Ector County. You know where Ector County is? Anybody want to tell me? It's far out there, 200 miles west of Boston. I go out biking there a lot. They got one hospital. How do I know that one hospital? Well, I've been biking with friends for years out there, and I had a friend that had a bad crash, and we took him to the hospital. And of course, the first thing that the intake people asked was, do you have insurance? Do you have Medicare? Do you have Medicaid? My colleague, my friend, teaches at Rice, had insurance. But I queried the administrator. I said, well, if they don't have one of those three and they don't have a big checkbook, how do they pay for this? And he said, we do. And he said, if we get too many unpaying customers, we have to close our doors. It's not a question of being able to get money from, cake sales and banquets. We close our doors. And we close our doors, not to the indigent only, and not to those who are on Medicaid, but to everybody, including my friend who had plenty of insurance coverage to pay for it. So one of the things we've got to start thinking about are what I call the collateral effects. I didn't say damage, but collateral effects. And this leads me to one most interesting parts of Medicaid. In many states, Medicaid expenditures are taxed by the state government. So the state comes in and taxes Medicaid expenditures. And they tax the hospital. They say, St. Luke's, you got $10,000 of Medicaid. We're going to tax that at 10%. Now here's the tricky part. The state turns around and gives that money right back to the hospital. You with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's complicated. It then looks like the state actually spent more money to support Medicaid and therefore can apply to the federal government and say, hey, we're helping out Medicaid. We taxed them and then we gave them the money back. I think we know what that looks like. It's a Ponzi scheme, right? It's a sleight of hand. It looks like the state is spending more money and therefore eligible for reimbursements or matching. The more the states spend on Medicaid, the more the states get back from the feds. If the state of Texas were to make eligible eye examinations and maybe hearing inspections, they would get more money back from the feds. But this is a trick. About 20 states have been doing it, some blue, some red. But my suspicions are that many of the states that are doing it, if they were, and this bill will prohibit that from happening, are going to be in a hurting way to keep their hospitals open. So I guess what I'm saying is when you read the bill, there's much more here than worrying. I mean, and I think there's legitimate concerns about people having to roll every 6 months. I think there are legitimate concerns about the work requirements. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to argue that they may pale in comparison to the effects it'll have on healthcare in our communities if hospitals have to close or curtail their staff and have to curtail their equipment and their testing and their scope of service.
Now, Professor Stein, we do have a question from YouTube that says, please ask Bob Stein what the effect of the Medicaid changes will be on rural hospitals. You kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
I use Ector as my quintessential example. Everything I have read from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which is made up of House Republicans and Democrats, would suggest that the smaller the area, the poorer the area, county is what we're talking about, the bigger the impact here. And it has to do with scales of economy. There are no efficiency. It's not like a bus, right? If a bus can seat 100 people and you get 100 people on that bus, you can operate it at a pretty high level of profit until, of course, the bus breaks down. But you build in that kind of maintenance. Hospitals are not like that. Getting doctors to come to hospitals to work, they want to have what? Staff, laboratories, MRIs, CAT scans, equipment, all of which is extremely expensive. If these rural hospitals don't get it, then you have to go to another hospital.
Let's pull back into the bill here. We're talking with Bob Stein right now. We're taking your questions and comments at 713-440-8870. Robert's on the line from Northwest Houston. Robert, what's on your mind?
My question about the bill, what is it doing about the cost of higher education? I had 3 kids that I put through school. I did not want them burdened with the tremendous cost and having to take out the loans. And the single most impact to my income has been funding those colleges.
Oh, we kind of lost you at the end there, Robert. Let's go over to Bob. Bob, did you get enough there to answer?
Yeah. The bill doesn't address it directly. The president's executive order as of about a month ago stopped any repayment of student loans. Now, the Supreme Court of the United States also ruled that Biden and the Biden administration or his Department of Education could no longer I guess the phrase is forgive these loans. So right now that's been frozen. There is no provision in this reconciliation bill for the Department of Education to continue forgiving student loans. So there's no new appropriation. The president stopped any previous administrations. I'm afraid our listener from Northwest Harris County's children are going to have to bear that burden, at least if they've not already been covered. And quite a bit of money has been spent on it already.
In the research I have in front of me, it says the bill proposes significant changes to student loan repayment plans. Does that wash, and what does that mean?
Well, it means now the repayment plans do require students. I haven't read that particular, but I remember that House members were being heavily lobbied. Think about a student loan. You have to understand how this works. I'm a student at Rice. I apply for a loan. I get it. Where do I get the loan from? A bank. The bank is told that the full faith and credit of the federal government will back that loan. So if for some reason I fail to repay on that loan, the bank immediately gets repaid. That lowers my interest rate, presumably. But who's a real beneficiary of my student loan? The bank and Rice University. Oh, I'm a recipient of the loan and I benefit, but don't kid yourself. If there's one of me and there's 5,000 more of me, then the school and the banks make money. The banks get their interest either now or later. Now, if they get it later, you with me? It's in inflated dollars. So it almost is in the interest of banks for students to, not be able to pay their loans back right away. Then the federal government comes in and pays back both principal and reasonable interest in non-deflated dollars. So again, if you want to know who cares about student loans, look at who testifies before the House and Senate on loans, not students, usually banks, and they want weaker controls, and occasionally universities and colleges and
Hey, Bob, so what do you think about the SALT tax, the state and local taxes being raised from the $10,000 cap for property tax write-offs to $40,000?
Yeah, I mean, this was a Republican issue in 2017 when President Trump was first elected, and the Republicans didn't want to give the blue states, which, and I include our own state in this category, we're not blue, that have high property taxes. We have pretty high property taxes. We don't have an income tax. We have high sales taxes. So we look more like New York. They have an income tax, sales tax, property tax, and fees. The problem is that the 5 to 7 House members in the Republican Party from New York and Long Island and Central California are holding seats that Biden won in 2024. So they've got to come back to their districts and say they've reduced state and local taxes. But most Republicans in the House, and I think it's very true in the Senate, are bristling over the SALT agreement. Now, I should say be careful about it. It raised the cap to 40,000. It's at 10 now. But it income tested it. For families incomes over 500,000, it goes back down to 10. And it's income tested over time. Okay. I don't think those Republican legislators in Biden districts are going to be happy with that. But the Senate, not happy at all with it. So that's a case of where the bill is more about the politics. If you don't control the House, it really doesn't matter what you want, right? Mm-hmm. You can't introduce legislation. So, and the Republicans only have a 3-vote margin here in the House. That's why that seat that Sylvester held was being held off till November we vote. So it's a real dicey game here. The Republicans in the Senate are really not happy with the SALT agreement. And many House members, like Chip Roy up there in Austin, he wasn't happy with it because from the Republican point of view, you're rewarding states that are taxing their citizens at high rates. And you think 500,000 is a pretty high income. In those states, it's about the median income for people who have more than $40,000 in property taxes, usually because they have multiple homes.
We want to remind you, you're listening to Hello Houston, and we're speaking with political science professor Bob Stein. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. We have a call right now from Dave from Weston Lakes. Dave, what is your question for Bob Stein?
Well, it's a comment in general on the big, beautiful bill. It, like everything else that Congress does, is adding significantly to the federal deficit. For the last 15 years, I have been writing to all the major media organizations, including NPR, and the leaders of Congress, saying I care about the future for my children and grandchildren. Nobody in Washington or the media seems to. I just don't understand it.
Thank you for that comment. Remember, we're always interested in your thoughts, 713-440-8870. I want to move on to something else, Bob. Over the weekend, a lot of social media is going out from both parties, both sides. There is a meme, a comment going around, and I'd love for you to help me go through what is true and what is false here. So the first thing that comes up is that the president, if Big Beautiful Bill gets passed by the Senate, we don't know where it'll be at when they pass it, if they pass it, it says he can delay or cancel elections legally. Is there verbiage buried in these almost 2,000 pages that allows for that?
I have not seen it. And to the best of my knowledge, the Constitution is very clear on this. There is no provision for stopping an election other at the local level. And we had, of course, the 2012 Hurricane Sandy, if I remember correctly. And some governments actually wanted along the East Coast, where the storm was greatest, to stop voting. They did not, but that is not a federal prerogative, nor is it an executive order. Again, I saw nothing in the law that directly addressed that issue. So I'm not a constitutional lawyer, and I'll defer to those, but I saw nothing in the law. And
okay, I want to hit a couple more of these, and you can give me a quick answer on them. He can ignore Supreme Court rulings for up to a year or more.
Not to my knowledge,
Not
no.
that you saw. He can fire government workers. What?
It doesn't mean he won't ignore them. It's just he cannot do so at his pleasure.
Okay, he can fire government workers for political disloyalty.
He can remove federal employees. His motive and justification can, in fact, be failure to comply with the goals of his administration. You can interpret that as you will. I don't think he'll ever say that they were not loyal to the Republican Party platform. He'll simply say, and he has said in executive orders, he's removed people from some of the oversight committees, SEC, and he said they simply are not complying with the goals of this administration.
Okay, and I'm just going through this as these are things supposedly buried deep within the One Big Beautiful Bill, that protesters can be tracked down and criminalized.
I have found no language in that uses that phrase. Clearly, there are things in the bill that give the Homeland Security and the national government authority to do that. And executive orders, a recent fight with Harvard, but I find nothing in the law that does that.
And I guess the final line from this that I'll take is that the bill doesn't break the law, it rewrites the law so Trump never has to break it again.
That's an interpretation that I would not necessarily be sympathetic to, but I could easily see beauty in the eye of the beholder, that someone would see that, yes. But I see nothing in the law that gives that language credibility.
Professor Stein, we received a text that says, "Hi, this is Steve Kellogg. Congratulations on your imminent retirement. What process does the Big Beautiful Bill have to go through to become law? What is the timeline, and how is it likely to change through the Senate?"
Well, if you all know the cartoon, I'm a bill on Capitol Hill, a bill of this one. And I did still use that in my classes, but it has to originate in the House because it's a bill dealing with spending and taxation. The bill, as we saw, came out with, I think, a 3-vote majority, was it? No, 1-vote majority.
One vote.
One vote. Frank's right. And now it goes to the Senate, and it goes through the same committee process. When the Senate's all done, they have a bill. If the bill is not identical to the House, and when I use the word identical, I mean identical. I's and T's have to be crossed. There are people who sit there and look at that bill and make certain that every section of every part of the bill is the same. If it's not, it goes back to the House. The House can make changes. If the House cannot make changes that are identical to the Senate, both bodies, the Speaker of the House, Mr. Johnson, and the Mr. Thune, who is the ranking Republican in the Senate, form committees in their respective bodies, and they're called conference committee. That committee of the House and Senate meet and try to work out differences. They work those differences out until the last day of Congress. Failure to do so means there is no budget. There is no reconciliation bill. However, should they work out their differences, then the conference committee report must go back to both bodies, House and Senate, and win approval. Simple majority vote. If such a bill passes both the House and Senate, it goes to the president for signature. He has three options, as we all know, hopefully. He can sign it, he can veto it, and he can put it in his pocket. If it's close to the end of Congress, we call it a pocket veto, and the bill fails.
Right. So what's your take on how many senators will support this? I mean, what do you think is going to happen to this in the Senate?
It gets more complicated. This bill can only pass under what we call a special rule. And that special rule does not allow the Democrats to filibuster. It allows in the Senate, not in the House, in the Senate, a simple majority. But there's something called the Byrd Rule, named from former Senator Harry Byrd from West Virginia. The Byrd Rule says you can do this reconciliation bill with a simple majority and no filibuster, but every aspect of the bill must be pertinent to spending. There are parts of the bill, Frank, you were touching on this, Jack, when you talked about these MEMS, one of which puts limit on AI, restricts the federal courts from overturning executive orders. That, by anyone's measure, violates the Byrd Rule. Doesn't deal with spending, doesn't deal with revenues. However, the arbiter of that, like in a baseball game umpire or basketball game referee, is a parliamentarian. And the Senate, through its majority rules, simple majorities, can overturn that rule. So we don't even know whether parts of this bill meet the Byrd Rule. Those that do meet the Byrd Rule fall under my definition of simple majority in the Senate, simple majority in the House, must have an identical bill, goes to conference, comes out, has to be voted on in both bodies and receive a majority vote, then goes to the president, who we would presume would sign the bill, but I would not make any bet on that. All of this has to be done by when? There are two dates that are important here. Date number one is when the Congress expires, and that's, of course, end of the calendar year. But the other date, because in this bill is a provision to raise the debt ceiling. Mm-hmm. And that has to be done before we default on our loans. And those are the bonds that China has, Japan holds, stockholders like me. And that we don't know. We don't know when that date is, but we think it's sometime late summer, maybe late July, early August. So my sense is this bill's got a ticking time bomb. And
in a one-word answer, do you think it will pass? Yes or no?
Oh, yeah. A bill will pass.
Okay, we are talking with Bob Stein from Rice. Our number here, 713-440-8870. Oliver from the Galleria is on the line. Oliver, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny enough. I think the question just kind of got answered, but do you think the Medicaid cuts will kind of hinder the bill from passing or something like that?
Thank you, Oliver.
I don't think the Senate will go for some of the provisions in the Medicaid. And I want to be clear here, I don't think there are cuts to Medicaid expenditures. There are changes in the rules that may lead to lower levels of expenditures on Medicaid, which is the problem. We just don't know how much we're going to be spending. When Frank supports maybe a 6-month checkout, he may be right. It may not have any impact, or it may have some impact, but we don't know, which means we can't gauge what the deficit's going to look like. This isn't like saying Frank decided not to take the family on a vacation and he saved $1,500. Boom. That's $1,500 he can put into his kid's education. What Frank says is, well, we're going to go on vacation, but if John shows up, my oldest son, it might cost more. But if he does show up, it might cost less.
Well, Frank can't go on vacation anywhere. He's got that infection. He can't get
That's
treated
right,
at
that's
the
staph
hospital.
infection.
Yeah.
So,
take a vacation.
while we're talking about Medicaid, what about SNAP benefits? Those seem to be threatened also. or at least
Yeah,
changed.
And truth in advertising here, I don't want people to think that I am biased, but my oldest daughter is at Office of Management and Budget and in charge of the SNAP program. And oversees the changes. So my knowledge here is a little bit more detailed. What they're doing, again, is eligibility requirements, and they are cutting spending on this one. This one is a real hard cut. Again, think about the people that benefit and receive benefits from the SNAP program. Of course, low-income people who get food pantries, just the one right near my house. But where does this food come from?
Farmers.
From farmers. And farmers count on the government buying their food at a price that is prearranged and guaranteed. Barring weather and bad crop failures, farmers look at the SNAP program as a guaranteed income. People who eat the food look at it as a supplement, if not a primary source of. So again, the constituencies are affected, but this will be a big cut. It's an expensive program. I've not heard Mr. The Doge people or even the president making any charges about SNAP programs. But Mr. Volker, who is the author of the 2025 Heritage Report that's driving a lot of this, he's OMB director. This will be a big cut. And in our community, it is already having an effect on the stocks. Because remember, food's perishable, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you cut, it's not like, oh, I made a mistake. Let's get some more food on the shelves. Farmers don't grow, produce doesn't get delivered, or it spoils. The same condition of the AID program, Agency for International Development, only, I would have thought Trump would have moved some of that money to domestic food support, but the SNAP program is going to get a hit in this bill. The magnitude of it will vary on each community, but it's not trivial.
We had a text that came in that noted section 7302, Rules Committee point 119-3. I tell you all that because that may mean something to you. Would in essence allow the executive branch to ignore contempt orders. Thus, this, I would believe, allows Trump or any other leader to do what he or she wishes without consequence. Please discuss this dangerous provision.
There are two other provisions in that right near it. One is to limit the use of AI in police enforcement, which would be a bit like facial recognition. But this particular one, which allows the president to ignore contempt orders on his executive orders, might not meet the Byrd rule. It has nothing to do with the spending and revenue raising of the federal. So the Senate side, the House side can do this. They're under no prohibition in what they want to put in the reconciliation bill. But the Senate can't vote out a bill that ignores this aspect of the Byrd rule. So
am I
again,
off base? When I hear you saying this, the first thing that pops to my mind is, who's following these rules anyway anymore? If there is this Byrd rule, are they going to abide by it? We have seen a lot of things shift.
I think there's a fair argument that they're not going to. Well, I don't know. I would put that at a 50-50. If you don't follow the Byrd rule, if you allow the Senate to do this on a simple majority vote, you risk this happening again when the other party, in this case the Democrats, are in power.
They don't.
Keep in mind.
That doesn't seem to be a concern these days from where I'm sitting.
I don't disagree with you. And I think there's every reason to think that this aspect of the law might, I'm relatively certain the parliamentarian will rule that this and other provisions in the House bill are simply violations of the Byrd rule, which means that the Senate can vote on them, but they're subject to filibuster and to a 2/3 majority.
So much here, Bob.
So much. Bob, you're going to have to come back and join us here in studio at on Hello Houston.
Thank you for coming today and talking with us about this. And it does have a long road ahead, so we'll have more to talk about. Thank you, Bob.
Take care.
Bob Stein is the Lina Goldman Fox Professor of Political Science at Rice University. After the break, we'll talk about sustainable rooftop farming with Skyfarm's August Stubler. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Holocaust Museum Houston, featuring Ilan Ramon, A Life and Legacy, the story of the first Israeli astronaut. Exhibit opening and reception on May 29th. Details at hmh.org.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Houston Grand Opera, opening the 25-26 season with Porgy and Bess, featuring music by George Gershwin, blending jazz, blues, and spirituals. Tickets available now at hgo.org.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVIN.com. Purchasing vehicles in minutes with the VIN or license plate, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at GiveMeTheVIN.com. Support comes from the Houston Symphony, concluding their classical season with Mahler's Third Symphony under music director Yuri Valchua, featuring mezzo-soprano Marina Prudenskaya, May 30th through June 1st. Tickets at houstonsymphony.org.
Support comes from Baylor College of Medicine, creating tomorrow's medicine today. Known for their medical research and innovation, Baylor College of Medicine is a proud sponsor of Houston Matters with Craig Cohen, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
Support comes from Pearland, Texas, offering new construction with custom options and amenities, mature neighborhoods filled with trees, and urban living. Details at pearlandedc.com/inspiration. Pearland, inspiration lives here.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from UpReach Learning, presenting a summer academic boot camp for grades K through 8th to prepare for next year's math, reading, and writing curriculum. Camps begin June 2nd. Registration info at upreachlearning.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To share your thoughts on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
The Skyfarm at Post Houston is a 1-acre rooftop food farm that makes up part of the Houston Entertainment Hub Skylawn, operated by the Blackwood Educational Land Institute and considered the largest rooftop farm in the state of Texas. The Skyfarm provides a model for the possibilities of rooftop soil growing as well as community-supported agriculture. Joining us now to tell us more is August Stubler, the lead Sky Farmer at the Skyfarm at Post Houston. Welcome to Hello Houston.
Hey guys, it's wonderful to be with you today.
I love that title, lead Sky Farmer.
Exactly.
Sky Farmer. So how do you become a Sky Farm and how did this come about?
Absolutely. So the farm is a partnership between Post, run by Frank Liu, and our educational nonprofit that teaches people about land. It's really important connection to make. So we love having this center point in the city where we can get in contact with people.
So it's on the roof of Post.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we've been up there.
We did
a promo up there. So of the roof, so tell me what percentage is the Sky Farm of the roof?
So it's about 1/6 of the roof, I would say.
Okay.
Yes.
And how much are you growing?
Yeah, and in terms of how many different plants or what. Yeah, I mean, I brought you guys some leeks that I harvested maybe an hour ago. We've got tomatoes, onions. We're growing kale. We'll have okra, cucumbers for the summer. So it's all
who's it for? Who are
it's
you
for
growing
everyone.
it for?
Yeah, so it's for everyone. That's kind of the entire point of this is people who come to visit us at Post get the chance to engage in the fields. Not everyone has the chance to go out to our farm out in Hempstead. That's about an hour outside the city. So when people come to Post, they can get their hands in the soil. And for a lot of people, it's their first time growing food.
That's my question.
Yeah.
How do you get the soil on the roof? Because I'm into gardening. That's my obsession. I'm very excited about this. I don't have a green thumb. But soil is heavy and you have a lot.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
what is the process to getting it up there? What is that logistics?
Yeah, so the infrastructure for the building, they craned the original soil up there. It is a special rooftop mixture, but part of my job as the lead Sky Farmer is soil regeneration. So we're not really interested in putting and craning a bunch of more soil up there. I have to learn how to create soil on the spot. And that's a wonderful part of my job.
So if somebody comes up there to see it,
yes,
do they just like snip a few tomatoes and take them, or?
So we have opportunities for the public to engage with us. We have open farm days on Wednesdays where we do community sustainability lessons, crop lessons. We have volunteer opportunities on Friday mornings. But the idea is that if you see me out in the fields, you can stop me and we can talk for forever about them. So we have a lot of really wonderful things going on right now. We actually have a family of killdeer birds. So their babies just hatched yesterday. So we have beautiful little shorebirds running around the fields.
When you talk about not wanting to bring more soil up and stuff, I go back to my school days of learning about rotating crops so that the soil stays good and that you don't abuse it by taking all of the nutrients out that one thing needs and then it's dead soil. How much can you rotate in such a small area on a roof?
You'd be surprised. So we practice a form of agriculture called regenerative agriculture. So the idea is that we're not planning for one season, we're planning for every single season after. So we partner with a lot of native annual plants that are considered weeds, and we use them as mulch. We offer lots of resources to the pollinators, but it's about having a dynamic system to figure out how to make it work for everyone.
So this clearly is a passion.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
Were you a kid that just got in there even as a youngster? And did you go to A&M? Tell us about yourself.
So originally, I hated being outside and I hated being dirty.
Really?
So
welcome to my club.
Yeah, this is a relatively new development in the last 10 years of my life, but I have an undergrad degree in sustainable community development, and I have a master's degree in sustainable food systems.
Nice.
Amazing. So when you're looking at Houston, I mean, it's hard. We are in a harsh climate. We're about to get into, you're on a roof. You're with the soil. How do you grow things in Houston on a roof?
Yes, ma'am. I think that we forget sometimes that people have been here for thousands of years growing and living very peacefully in this land. So we do our best to replicate a lot of the native indigenous systems that we would see otherwise. And we do our best to incorporate cultivated crops into those systems in order to have a very well-balanced and well-rounded ecosystem.
So what are you planting right now?
So everything that we have for the season is in the ground. But for right now, we have okra, cucumbers, tomatoes, eggplants. We are also growing cover crops, so those are for the nutrition for the soil. And then we also have beautiful things like brown-eyed Susan, sunflowers, bee balm. These are native plants that offer resources to pollinators that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. So we want to make sure that we leave space for all these creatures.
Let's talk about native plants for a minute. My partner went, spent a lot of money, bought a bunch of native plants, planted them all. Turned out they weren't really native to us.
Okay, yeah.
They all died.
Absolutely.
What are we looking for? What lives best? If we want to take something from this garden into our own world, into our own lives, what should we be planting that'll give us the best results?
I think it's important to listen to your space and listen to your land. A lot of the times, the things that we would otherwise be bringing into the space are already there. So muscadine grapes, for example, grow all over Houston, and they are beautiful, very drought tolerant, and you could buy them from a plant nursery, or you could wait for them to pop up in your yard. So my best advice is go walk along the bayou, figure out what your backyard, what your front garden looks like, and figure out a similar ecosystem in Houston that you can go and grab some seed.
I didn't realize oleander is a desert plant.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you see oleanders in Galveston everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to grow an oleander, you certainly can.
Yeah, you definitely can. Houston has a really beautiful growing season. I know that our summers are really hot, but a lot of other places, they're only able to grow for 4 or 5 months out of the year, but we can basically grow for 10.
Does your garden supply anyone? I mean, does your food go to a table anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a lot of chefs that we partner with. Because we're such a small farm and because I'm the lead farmer there, we can offer them a lot of niche things that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. So these are fennel blossoms right here. They are really highly sought after. If you guys would like to eat them too, these little pods come off.
If you're watching on our YouTube channel right now, you'll be able to see the plant, and
We're
you're about
eating
to
flowers.
see Celeste eat a flower.
Become a goat.
That's a salad.
They're really wonderful for us,
Beautiful.
but these are an ingredient that chefs otherwise would be paying a very high price to get not fresh ingredients. So
It smells wonderful.
absolutely. So we're able to offer all of these resources both to the pollinators and to the chefs around town.
That is so cool. You know, there's a herb farm on top of the Grove at Discovery Green.
Yes, I
Isn't
did
that
know
cool?
that. It
It's
is
very
really cool.
Yeah.
So when will you harvest some of these veggies?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I harvested leeks for you guys this morning, like an
Can't
hour
wait to eat
ago.
some.
So
I want to
we're
go back to this flower for a minute. It tastes like licorice.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
It does.
really.
You tried it.
I did. I just
Mhm.
ate one.
Ernie won't eat
Isn't it
anything.
beautiful and
I will.
sweet?
You put it in front of me, I'll eat it.
Yeah.
Those are pretty.
And so if people want to get involved, one more time, how can people get involved and join you at the garden?
Absolutely. So we invite anyone from the public to come to our open farm days. Those are free lessons for the public. They are every Wednesday night, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. So last week we had a discussion about fennel. The week before we did our spring herbal tea harvest. So lots of really fun stuff there.
What a great idea.
What a fabulous thing. August Stubler is the lead Sky Farmer at the Sky Farm. You can join them any Wednesday at the Sky Farm at the Post Houston. August, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And that brings us to the end of our show.
Let's do it again tomorrow.
We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research.